Let's move on to the hog and pork sectors. So lots going on there. I'm tempted to say that might be that trade might be one of the issues to monitor the most, but what can we just think of when thinking ultimately of profitability trends for the sector?
Yeah, so hogs very similar to cattle. Had a really strong year. There's been after several years of weak demand and global oversupply, it seems the hog market is much more balanced. And we've also seen, because of the strength in the cattle sector, we've seen that spill over into the hog sector, and this is really being driven by the consumer. So we've actually seen the consumer shift consumption away from beef and consuming more pork. So that actually is creating some demand and supporting those hog prices as well. And as the crop sector does struggle with low commodity prices, this does actually help the livestock sector and lowering those feed costs. So I would say optimism in the hog sector is really high right now. We've got prices that are near at the 5-year high and softening feed costs. So we're actually seeing margins for a farrow to finish operation in both East and Western Canada will be at their highest level in 5 years. So really good news from a profitability standpoint. But it isn't all good news. So you mentioned about some trade disruptions and different policies. The one thing that we're watching as well is that our exports to the U.S. And so one reason why they might be decreased is we're actually seeing an increase in slaughter capacity in Canada, which is a good news story. So again, this ties to more processing within Canada. Maybe that enables the ability to find these diversified markets that are away from the U.S. So that's a good news story. But you mentioned trade. What's been implemented on January 1st was something called voluntary country origin labeling, so VCOOL. And so in theory, this could reduce exports or reduce demand in the U.S. for Canadian hogs. However, there are production concerns emerging in the U.S. and so due to disease. So they're actually seeing slowing herd growth. So this is still creating strong demand and margins for Canadian producers. I would say through the first half of this year, we'll see how these diseases unfold and whether or not this country of origin labeling will have an impact in the second year. But I think it's fair to say, from a consumer standpoint in the U.S., with record high beef prices and protein being a relatively more affordable protein source, there may be little appetite from American consumers to pay for higher pork prices due to labeling requirements, even if they are voluntary. As
Yeah,
well, yeah.
sorry, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so I was just going to show you the next visual on the screen here. And this is our exports to the U.S., just to highlight how important the U.S. market is. And so you can see different periods on there, but the U.S. did implement country or mandatory labeling back in 2009. And so what we actually saw when that happened, exports dropped 50% that year compared to the year before. That was partially due to those labeling requirements. So the difference being this time, like I said, is the new labeling requirements are voluntary. So whether or not they're adopted is more up to the importers in the U.S. and processors. And it's really difficult to highlight or quantify the market impact at this point. I think if you look at the U.S., I mentioned their supply, their sow herd has been declining for 6 years straight. So that still should create some strong demand for Canadian hogs as well. And then you touched on CUSMA and Christian touched on CUSMA as well. Sorry, that's something that's going to weigh on the ag sector until we know what the agreement looks like, if it's reviewed or renegotiated. There's still that uncertainty. So we talk about diversification. There's still strong demand in other countries, especially Japan, and we have these existing trade agreements that will help to phase out existing tariffs. So we have to leverage those as well.
And the one thing I'd add is, when it comes to China, Canada, then, details TBD in terms of like what it would mean for the pork supply chain. So that's another thing too. So biosecurity would be one thing to know to watch in the US for sure. So thanks for that.